to fluently and lucidly interpret Mars in the 11th house, make sure that, first of all, you're very clear about what Mars represents and what the 11th house represents. So let's start there real quick. This is the 11th house. Houses are areas of the sky. And as you can see, the 11th house is the part of the sky that's above our heads, but on the eastern segment. And that's important because that's the basis for everything that it symbolizes. Because it's up above us, it symbolizes the public world, society. And because it's to the east, it symbolizes society benefiting us. And that's what everything in the 11th house is all about, how we benefit from society. So you can divide it into two segments, social benefits and cultural benefits. Social benefits are things like friends. But these are not family friends. These are friends. These are social friends, social contacts, people that you meet at parties, people that you go to parties with, people that you invite to parties. Similarly, we can say it's the house of contacts, people who you know, who can help you get the stuff that you want. And another way that we socially benefit from society is that society is our market in which the merchant sells things. So you get income from the 11th house because you're getting from society. People are paying you. How do we benefit culturally from society? Well, society has a whole bunch of theaters, cinemas, concert halls, etc. And so the 11th house signifies arts, performance of arts, enjoyments of arts, entertainment, entertainers, and so forth. And because it symbolizes art and artists, it signifies talents, artistic talents. And not just in the performance, but also in the enjoyment of art. People tend to overlook that it also takes talent to enjoy art. So it's like refinement and talent is symbolized by the 11th house. And finally, what do we get basically from everything in the 11th house? Pleasure, enjoyment. Now let's talk about Mars. And what does Mars symbolize? Mars symbolizes masculinity. That's the basis of everything else that it symbolizes. Masculinity has two key facets to it. It's independent and it's inceptive. So Mars signifies individuality, independence, freedom. It's not cooperative. It signifies self-reliance, because self-reliance is what you need to have independence. It signifies strength, because strength is what you need to be self-reliant. It signifies all the things that make us strong and increase our strength. So not only muscles and exercise like that, but also weapons, tools, technologies, machines, and so forth. Finally, since it's individualistic and not cooperative, it signifies conflict. So this is why Mars indicates competition, contest, struggle, strife, war, violence, and anger. Now, on the side of inceptivity, initiative, ambition, go-get-emness, let's do thisness. That's why it signifies passion, because passion is what drives you to get off your ass and do something. It signifies bravery, which is the willingness to embrace the passion and take the initiative. And finally, it signifies command, because a person who has bravery has command. Because bravery gets rid of hesitation and allows us to make decisions. And making decisions is the key component of giving commands, being dominant. Now that we know what Mars signifies and what the 11th house signifies, we could be lucid and fluent in interpreting Mars in the 11th house. It's not that difficult. All we need to do is take the symbolisms of Mars and put them next to the symbolisms of the 11th house and see where they are on the same page or off the same page. For example, the 11th is the house of pleasure and Mars is the planet of passion. So these two obviously are on the same page. They synergize really well. The planet of passion in the house of pleasures. That's a seed of how we will interpret Mars in the 11th. It's just a seed for now. Let's just get our seeds straight. Another thing about Mars in the 11th is that the 11th is the house of talents and Mars is the planet of strengths. So talents are our strengths. So these two synergize well too, and this is another seed of how to interpret Mars in the 11th. And finally, the 11th symbolizes friendships, but Mars symbolizes individuality. So we might mistake this as being off the page with each other. We might mistake this as a clash. But remember the picture that I showed you of what the 11th house physically is. It's on the eastern side of the overhead quadrant. So the 11th house is about friends, but not in terms of how we support our friends or we sacrifice for our friends. Quite the opposite. It's about how we benefit from our friends. So Mars being the planet of individuality and the 11th being the house of friendships actually works together. Now let's try to grow these seeds a little bit. The way that they grow is highly dependent upon the soil that they're in. So it's impossible to make a video about Mars in the 11th house and explain to you how to interpret it. But I can show you the seeds and the way that those seeds basically grow and alert you that you have to consider the soil around the seed. In other words, what else is in this house? And what else is affecting Mars? And what else is in the chart? That will certainly have a huge effect. And we'll look at that as well in this video. But first, let's just flesh these seeds out a little bit more and grow them. So about this first seed, that the 11th is the house of pleasure and Mars is the planet of passion. That means that people with Mars in the 11th house are wealthy people. They have passion for pleasures. So they go after pleasures, they go after luxuries. They're ambitious people. They have strong motivations to acquire pleasures and wealth. They're luxurious people. They like luxury. They expect high-class things. And they tend to have high ambitions. Now, the 11th is the house of talents, and Mars is the planet of strengths. So people with Mars in the 11th house are powerful people. In other words, strength is their talent. So these are the people who are athletic, healthy, and they're able to be effectively dominant and assertive. Also, people with Mars in the 11th house tend to be talented people. It depends on the soil, how this particular seed will grow. Will it grow more towards strength or more towards talent? And now this final seed, the 11th is the house of friends, and Mars is the planet of individuality, but the 11th friends are friends that benefit the self. So people with Mars in the 11th house are well-behaved. Now, let me explain that. Their selfishness is effective, and so it doesn't cause too many problems. That's what it means when you have Mars in the 11th house. Your selfishness is not malfunctioning. Your selfishness is getting rewarded. Mars is selfishness. 11th house is reward. So you're able to interact with people and friends in a way that you always benefit from it, and they don't feel bad about it. Therefore, people with Mars in the 11th house have integrity, and they're kind of likable and respectable. Now let's start to talk about soil that these seeds grow in. So let's look at some well-known people who have Mars in the 11th house using a whole sign system and tropical signs. So basically, we're expecting to find people who are athletes, artists, or highly respected or admired. So for artists, there's a lot of artists with Mars in the 11th house. Mozart, Salvador Dali, Harrison Ford, Al Pacino, Orson Welles, Elvis Presley, Dolly Parton, Janis Joplin, Dave Grohl. You can see they're gritty also. They're gritty artists. Mozart may be a little bit out of our context to understand how kind of flamboyant or weird he was. But Mozart as well. They're all gritty, unusual, individualistic artists. And that's the nature of Mars. So, for example, Salvador Dali. Well, let's take a look at Salvador Dali's chart and just see what kind of soil is this chart providing to Mars in the 11th house that makes it grow not as an athlete but as an artist. Well, as you know, you really want to combine 3, 5, and 11 to get a fantastic artist. That's the artist yoga. Houses 3, 5, and 11. Look at Salvador Dali. The third lord is Mercury. It's with the fifth lord, Mars, in the 11th house. So fifth lord, Mars, in the 11th house, with the third lord in the 11th house, and the 11th lord, Venus. So, of course, this is just like an eye-opener. This is off the chart artistic context to Mars being in the 11th house. Besides artists, there's a few important athletes, Caitlyn Jenner and O.J. Simpson. Let's take a look at these two. Caitlyn Jenner not only is an athlete, but is a famous person for gender dysphoria or gender rights or whatever. So what is it about her that indicates that? So as you know, the gender neutral or bigendered planets are Mercury, Saturn, and Ketu. So let's look at Caitlyn's chart. First lord, the house of the body, is Mars in the 11th house. And what sign is it? Virgo. It's Mercury sign. And what planet is it with? Saturn. So the first lord is in a bigendered sign, the sign owned by a bigendered planet with a bigendered planet, while the moon is in Saturn's sign. So the moon is also, the first lord is in a bigendered owner sign. The moon is also in a bigendered owner sign. And then Mercury, which is the bigendered planet, is with Ketu, which is the bigendered planet. So there's a lot of bigenderalness going on in this chart that is not coming from Mars in the 11th house. You don't have to interpret Mars in the 11th house to mean gender dysphoria just because Caitlyn Jenner has Mars in the 11th house. It's the fact that it's in Virgo as Mars, the masculine planet in Virgo, with Saturn, while the moon is in Saturn's sign, while Mercury is with Ketu. And now let's move on to O.J. Simpson, not just famous as an athlete, but famous as a violent criminal. What has he got? Look at his Mars in the 11th house. It's with Rahu. So it's not very stable, is it? It's kind of wild Mars in the 11th house. And then on top of that, his moon is by itself in the 8th house, and his Saturn is in Leo rising. Now, finally, let's look at some people that are well respected with Mars in the 11th house. Sister Emmanuelle, Marie Curie, and Lucky Luciano. So the first two, Sister Emmanuelle and Marie Curie, are respected for their positive contributions to society. Lucky Luciano is just respected as a mob boss, just respected out of fear. That kind of respect. Let's look at Lucky Luciano. Why is it? Do we expect Mars in the 11th house to produce gangsters? No, it has to have the context that leads towards crime and brutality. And then you can get an O.J. Simpson or a Lucky Luciano. So, for example, his Mars is combust, and it's conjoined Saturn, who is also combust, and who is the lord of the 12th house. And it's conjoined a new moon. This Mars is conjoined to the Sun, Saturn, and Moon, and Mercury. And the moon is blank. It's a new moon, and it's the 6th lord, and Mercury is the 8th lord. So his Mars in the 11th house is with the 3 deuce-ton lords. The 3 difficult houses, 12, 6, and 8, are all there with his Mars in the 11th house. Plus, on top of that, his basic chart structure is to only have 3 signs occupied, which inclines one towards fighting. Understand the whole context of your chart, the soil in which your interpretive seeds grow, and visit my website, vicdecara.com, and click readings. My complete chart report explains each and every nook and cranny of your chart and will keep you occupied in self-discovery for years. I also have 2 groundbreaking new reports. The first of these, Your Nakshatra, organizes your active nakshatras in order of their importance to you and presents the fundamental interpretations for the planets that occupy them. The newest report, Star Strength, uses a system called Tarabala to unfold 90 interpretations of the nuanced relationships between all the planets in your chart, which paints a rich and detailed picture of how your various strengths cooperate or compete with each other. Order these or any of my reports and accelerate your journey to deeper self-understanding.